Isang malikhaing araw at mainit na pagbati sa ating mga kasama sa 59th UP National Writers Workshop. Upang ipakilala ang likhaan, UP Institute of Creative Writing at para magbigay din ng kanyang mensahe. Narito si Dr. Rolando B. Tolentino, ang kasalukuyang direktor ng UP ICW.
Isang maganda at maaraw na umaga sa ating lahat dito sa 59th UP National Writers Workshop. Pagbati sa ating 12 fellows para sa workshop, isa sa pinakamahigpit na seleksyon ang pagpili ng magiging fellows para sa 59th UP National Writers Workshop dahil sa dami ng bilang ng aplikasyon at kwalipikadong manunulat. Umangat ang inyong aplikasyon at kwalifikasyon kaysa sa inyong mga naging kahanay, kaya pagbati sa 12 fellows nitong workshop. Isa rin ang 59th UP National Writers Workshop na sa matagal na panahon, simula 1990s, ay nagkaroon ng parity o pantay na bilang ng babae at lalaking fellows para sa workshop. Tila patungo sa isang vintage year ang workshop na ito. Historical din ang inyong workshop dahil sa pagpapatuloy nitong edisyon ngayong 2020, ang taon ng COVID-19 pandemiko at ng lockdown sa bansa. Nang magkaroon kami ng online meeting kung itutuloy ang workshop o isususpindi ito para sa susunod na taon, ipinaalala ng dating ICW Director Butch Delisay na wala pang taon simula nang itatag ang UP National Writers Workshop na ito ay hindi natuloy. Kahit pa sa taong idineklara at pinapamunuan ng bansa ng martial law, kahit pa nag-People Power 1 at 2. Kaya kahit pa may pandemiko o dahil nga may pandemiko, lalong kailangang ipagpatuloy ng ICW ang UP National Writers Workshop para ipahiwatig na ang malikhaing pagsulat, panitikan, pagbabasa at iba pang malikhaing proseso ay mga esensyal na kalakaran sa bansang pinapandemiko at nila-lockdown, na mahalaga ang mga malikhain at kritikal na proseso sa pag-navigate ng mga individual at kolektibong buhay sa ganitong peligrosong panahon at espasyo. Historical ang 59th UP National Writers Workshop dahil ito ang una na sana ay huli pero sa klase ng any na management style ng gobyerno sa pandemiko, kaya malamang ay hindi huli. Ito ang unang na workshop na nasa online platform. Sinusubaybayan namin mabuti ang implementasyon ng online platform na ito para sa iba pang malakihang regular na proyekto ng ICW na sinuspindi ngayong taon dahil sa COVID-19. Tagumpay na namin na migrate sa online platform ang Panayam o Craft Lecture Series, ang Interdisciplinary Book Forum, at gumawa pa ng ganap o literary performances sa online platform. Kung magtatagumpay itong online edition ng workshop, ang Basic Writing Workshop, ang Amelia Lapena Bonifacio Writers Workshop, pati ang Hebino Abad Seminar Workshop in the Teaching of Creative Writing at ang Bienvenido Lumbera Seminar Workshop in Literary Translation ay ipapatupad na rin sa susunod na mga taon sa online platform. Ang UP National Writers Workshop ang flagship program ng likhaan, UP Institute of Creative Writing. Ang institute ay kinabibilangan ng 3 national artists, senior writers, mga kahenerasyon kong manunulat, mga 2 nakakabatang henerasyon ng manunulat sa akin. Rest assured na sa paglulunsad nitong 59th edition, may mahaba at mayamang kaming karanasan sa implementasyon ng nakaraang 58 editions ng workshop. Ang matutunghayan yung edition, minus the online platform, ay pinanday ng best practices ng mga naunang edisyon at directors ng UP National Writers Workshop at ICW. Kaya sa pagtatapos ng workshop, bahagi ng programa ang assessment at online evaluation para sa higit pang ikakabuti ng susunod na mga edisyon ng workshop. Bukod sa panel sessions, nandito pa rin ang online edition. Sa online edition, ang breakout discussions, consultations sa writers ng Institute, extension program at graduation. Imagine niyo na lang sa ibang parallel universe tulad sa face-to-face na workshop, nagkakatipon-tipon pa rin tayo para sa mga personal na kwento, bonding, fellowship at inuman. Bago pa man nagkaroon ng mga akademikong programa mula certificate, undergraduate, masteral at doctoral sa malikhaing pagsulat, ang pangunahing training ng mga manunulat noon at maging sa kasalukuyan ay ang workshop para pandayin sa pamamagitan ng mga palitan ng nauna at mga batang manunulat ang manuskrito ng fellows na madalas ay nauwi sa pagsesermon at grandstanding ng nakakatandang manunulat sa nakakabatang manunulat. Kaiba rin ang UP National Writers Workshop dahil hindi baguhang manunulat ang pinapanday nito, kundi ang mid-career writers ng henerasyong ito. O ang mga manunulat na nakapaglabas na ng unang libro, na isa dula na ang unang dula, na isa pelikula na ang unang script at iba pa. Hindi na kayo sana makakarinig ng komento na go plant kamote o drama na pinupunit ang manuskrito o nililukot at itinatapon sa basurahan dahil sa workshop na ito, mas collegial na ang exchanges. Writer to writer, mga writers na lamang sa inyo ng ilang publikasyon na may mayamang karanasang bukas na ipamahagi para higit pang mapanday, maporma, magkalaman at mabigyan substansya ang inyong susunod na proyekto na book o film project. Kaya nga may presentasyon ng fellows ng kung saan kayo nanggagaling bilang manunulat, paano kayo nagsusulat at ano ang inyong kasalukuyang proyekto at ang mga concerns nyo sa pinapaunlad nito, sa pagpapaunlad nito. Ito ay para maging entry point sa pagbibigay ng komento ng bawat isa para sa pagtatapos ng inyong session ay may basket of comments at inputs na mas magsusustina sa revision at finalization ng inyong project. Nais ko parating ipaalala sa pagsisimula ng workshops na isaalang-alang ang nagpopondo ng workshop at ng mga programa ng ICW. At ito ay galing sa taxpayers' money o sa pondo ng mamamayang Filipino. Marami ay hindi man lang makakatuntong sa UP o makapaloob sa mga programa ng UP. Una ay dahil dito, kailangan pag-usayin natin ang partisipasyon sa workshop. Ikalawa, kailangan ninyong tapusin ang inyong proyekto dahil ang pondo ng mamamayan ang inilaan para sa inyong paglahok sa workshop. Ikatlo, kaya rin may webinar ang mga panels ng workshop, may website ang workshop na naglalaman ng mga poetic essays at summary ng discussion ng bawat sessions, pati ang extension program ay naka-broadcast live dahil ito na nga ang tungoy ng ICW na i-consolidate ito ang mga aktibidad tungo sa akademikong direksyon na tinatawag naming Literature for Social Development. Lahat ng mga video at document ng mga aktibidad ng ICW kasamang UP National Writers Workshop ay nilalabas sa social media accounts ng ICW at may repositoryo sa kanyang website, ang panitikan.ph, para sa mga hindi pinalad, halimbawa na maging fellow nitong workshop, ang mga historical na hindi na makakatungtong sa UP o hindi makakatunghay sa mga aktibidad ng UP ay may oportunidad na maging bahagi pa rin sa pamamagitan ng real-time at archival videos at documents nito online. Salamat din sa pag-ayon nyo sa privacy agreement para maging available ang videos, photos at documents para sa fair use ng publiko. Intense ang workshop dahil bootcamp ito. Inaasam nagsisimula at nagtatapos tayo sa nakakatakdang oras. Inaasahan din na basa natin ang mga manuskrito at handa tayo makipagtalakayan dito. Inaasahan din ipatupad na safe space ang workshop na hindi ito tolerate ang diskriminasyon at prejudices, pero mabilis lang ang workshop. Sama-sama nating ipagtagumpay itong 59th UP National Writers Workshop, isang produktibong workshop sa ating lahat.
Maraming salamat po, Dr. Tolentino. Panoorin at pakinggan naman natin ang mensahe mula kay Dr. Romulo Baquiran Jr., ang ating workshop director.
Magandang umaga sa inyo. Ako po si Joey Baquiran, ang inyong magiging workshop director. Itong workshop na ito, ang 59th UP National Writers Workshop, ay matagal nang binalak last year at inakalang namin na matutuloy noong Abril, pero may pangyayaring nangyari na hindi inaasahan. Handang-handa na kami noong Enero at naiplano na itong workshop na ito. Nag-usap na kami ng staff noon at nailatag na yung schedule at excited na para gawin sa Abril noong panahong yon, noong Enero. Pero may hindi inaasahang mangyayari noong Abril na yun nga, dumating ang COVID-19 at lahat ng buhay natin ay nabago, kasama na ang larangan ng mga palihan o maramihang pag-workshop. Kaya nga't hindi ko akalain na ako ay magiging pandemic workshop director, no? Pero noon nga, bandang Mayo, ay iniisip na baka naman mawala ito ng Agosto, kaya maaari pang maituloy ng face-to-face sa Baguio. Sana. Pero mukhang hindi gano'n ang nangyari kasi nagpatuloy ang community quarantine na isa sa pinakamatagal, kundi man ang pinakamatagal na quarantine sa buong mundo. Matagal at may kalupitan pang ipinatupad. At yun nga, hindi nga nangyari yung face-to-face nating workshop dahil sa paglala ng pandemya. At maraming naapektuhan, lalo na sa larangan natin sa sining, itong pandemic at lahat ay nag-adjust. Ay hindi nga pwede ang harapang pagkikita. Tayo ay mahigit sa 10 na sa fellows pa lamang ay 12 kayo. At tapos pa yung staff ay talagang hindi pwedeng nabigyan ng pahintulot ng universidad at kahit ng pamahalaan mismo. Ang na related sa ating larangan ng pagsulat, gayon din ng palihan, ng pelikula, ay nabawasan ng husto, kundi man talagang tumigil ang produksyon, ang pag-ugnayan sa napakahalagang mambabasa at manunood. Sa larangan ng ating mga manunulat, na ipagbawal din, hindi na rin pwede ang mga salo-salo, lalo na ang inuman, na ito ay harapang pag-uusap ng mga manunulat na napakahalaga dahil ito yung puso ng ating palihan, no? Dahil may iral nga ito dahil sa pakikinig sa isa't isa, pakikisalamuha, pagtatanghal ng akda na mas mabisa kung harapang ginagawa. Lahat tayo ay nag-retreat sa ating kanya-kanyang individual na espasyo, sa kanya-kanyang lungga. Merong mga naging productive at nakasulat ng kanilang mga tula, no? At mga kwento, dula. Pero karamihan ay talagang na-stress at hindi handa dito sa pangyayari ito. No? At nga, karamihan ay na-stress. Kaya nga ang ating coping mechanism ay napunta sa social media, pagpunta sa online. At ito nga yung bagong normal natin na nakita kahit sa larangan ng edukasyon ay asynchronous o synchronous na pagkikita na lamang ng estudyante at guro. Pero yun nga, sabi nga ng ating director ng UPICW ay hindi naputol kailanman itong tradisyon ng pagsasagawa ng UP National Writers Workshop kahit may martial law o may biglaang acts of God sa lipunan ay patuloy na sinasagawa ito. Kaya ngayon, itong ating Zoom workshop ay pagpapatunay lamang noong dedication ng UPICW sa pagtataguyod nitong workshop. No? Itong disenyo natin bilang workshop director, hindi naman ako nahirapang um, magsagawa nitong disenyo nito dahil sinusunod pa rin naman yung dati at yun nga lang, kanya-kanya tayong lugar ano, sa mundo, no? Kahit magkakalayo ay isa ring magandang mediation itong Zoom dahil nakikita tayo kahit na maliliit na screen lamang. Dahil nakaka-stress na matagal na nakaupo sa harap ng computer ay sinikap naming bawasan yung dating 90 minutes ay gawa na lamang 15 minutes. So sa kabuuan sa isang araw ay may natipid na 1.5 oras na mas marami ang recess kaysa sa dating face-to-face na format. Bakit nga ba tayo magkakasama dito sa workshop na ito? Bakit natin hilig na pag-usapan ang ating mga akda? Precisely kasi nga ang pagsusulat ay isang solitaryong gawain, although sinabi ng isa nating fellow na ang collaboration kung minsan ay isa ring paraan ng pag-akda. Pero sa karamihan ng mga writer habang nagsasagawa ng kanilang likha ay nakikipagbuno sa sarili. Ngayon, itong workshop na katulad nito, tinuturing na matagal, isa sa pinakamatagal na workshop sa Pilipinas. At dito rin nagtatagpo yung mga pinakamahuhusay na mentor at pinakamahuhusay na kabataang manunulat ay magtatagpo. Pero ito nga yung rationale nitong na workshop ito. Bakit sabi ng ilang opinionista bakit tuturuan pa itong magagaling? Ito naman ay hindi pagtuturo talaga, kundi isa itong meeting ground para hindi para mag-mentor dahil iniisip na on equal footing na itong mga panelists at workshoppers. No? Kaya nga tinawag na mid-career ay inaakala o tinuturing na marami ng karanasan at marami ng kaalaman, publikasyon, o at least may isang publikasyon at ngayon dito yung inyong bagong project ay i-present. Precisely, ito yung purpose ng workshop na ito. I-present ang inyong idea para sa isang bagong proyekto o kung hindi man ay tapos na at kasama dito yung inyong poetika. No? Iniiwasan sana ng tawagin itong poetika kundi pa parang gusto lamang malaman kung paano kayo nagsusulat, ang mga fellows, ano ang nag-trigger sa inyo, paano nyo sinosolve ang mga writing problems, ano yung mga happy solutions na tuklasan ninyo habang sa proseso ng pagsusulat. Ito ay i-present o ikukwento ninyo sa isang 75-minute na session na ipapakilala kayo at titignan din yung genre na kinabibilangan. Isa sa ipapasok ito doon sa diskursong ganoon. Pangalawa, ito ay isang pag-encourage sa inyo na ituloy ang proyekto na parang kami ay mag-cheer sa inyong proyekto na tuloy mo na yan, gawin na at naghihintay ang publication, naghihintay ang audience, ganun. At ito rin ay isang uri ng community bonding, no? Camaraderie among friends, among writers, at yung energy na bukod dun sa kaalaman ay yung energy ng isa't isa ay pampalakas loob, pampasigla para sa mga proyektong kasalukuyang ginagawa o gagawin sa kaugnay ng pagsusulat na proyekto ng pagsusulat na ipapakita ninyo sa 12 kasamang manunulat. Plus yung 17 panelists ay ito ang inyong ideal audience, no? Itong 20 o 30 kataong pagbubuksan nyo ng isip, katawan, ng kaisipan upang maibahagi ang inyong proyekto. So, ito rin ay isang paraan upang ang tawag dito, makita at to see your project in a new light. Kasi sa 20 utak na magbubusisi dito sa inyong proyekto ay merong mga bahagi na maaaring hindi nyo nakikita na nakikita ng iba at ngayon ay maipapaalam sa inyo at mai-incorporate ninyo sa pagre-revise o final publication ng inyong project. So yun, ito ay isang pagtatagpo ng mga kindred spirit para sa ika-aangat ng panitikan hindi lang sa universidad kundi naasahan sa buong Pilipinas sa inyong henerasyon. So welcome sa 59th UP National Writers Workshop.
Dr. Bakiran at Dr. Tolentino para sa ating pambungad na mensahe. May malaking pagbabago sa kasalukuyang taon ng 59th UP National Writers Workshop dahil sa pagpasok nito sa isang online na format. Ito ay hamong hinarap namin upang masigurong gaya ng mga nakaraang dekada ay nagpapatuloy ang palihan anuman ang kaligiran. Malaki ang pasasalamat ng UPICW sa ating fellows sa pagpiling humarap sa hamong ito. Naway may maiambag ang isang linggong talakayang ito sa pagtatala at sa pagbibigay hubog sa mga isyong iniluluwal ng ating kasalukuyang panahon. Bukod sa mga kasama natin sa ating Zoom meeting, nakastream din sa ating mga social media page ang ilan sa mga session ng 59th UP National Writers Workshop. Upang magabayan ang lahat sa takbo ng bagong format na ito, ay narito si Dr. Vladimir B. Gonzales, Deputy Director ng UPICW, para ibahagi ang mga technical na gabay sa ating isang linggong palihan.
Maraming salamat, Rona, at pagbati sa lahat ng kasama natin sa 59th UP National Writers Workshop. Maraming salamat din bukod sa mga nasabi na sa suporta ng Chancellor ng UP Diliman. Nabanggit po kanina na bumabaybay tayo sa bagong format at isa nga po sa mga kinakaharap bilang live stream dito ay may ilang mga inaayos. So mamaya po tatangkayin nating ihabol. May mensahe po actually si Chancellor Nemenso at sisikapin natin may pasok sa programa. Nagkataon pong may kasabay lang na pulong din ngayong araw. Pero nagpapasalamat kami bukod sa mensahe na bibigay niya sa atin mamaya. Nagpapasalamat po tayo doon sa suporta para maitulak itong workshop sa bagong format na ito. Sinasabi ko po ito dahil nga po kaming mga kasama sa workshop, yung actual na mga kasama ay nasa loob ng Zoom platform at nagtitimbang din kami na nangangapa kasi po yung narinig yung mensahe ni Dr. Bakiran na malinaw sa live stream, medyo putol-putol sa loob ng Zoom kaya kailangan din namin balikan mamaya. Pero ito yung mga hamon na hinaharap, ilang technical na bagay na binabaybay para masiguro na masigurong sa mga susunod na araw maging mas maayos at sa dulo naman talaga ay maitawid itong workshop na ito na kabahagi yung mga tao na nasa labas. Nakakatuwa nga kasi dati may mga sit-in lang kapag session pero ngayon yung ating mga session ay mapapanood na mas maraming bilang ng tao at yung mga kasama nating manunulat na nag-aabang ay narito po. Ang parting ito actually ay house rules para doon sa mga kasama sa workshop pero yun nga po dahil nga binukas sa lahat mas parang technical guide na nga po gaya na nasabi ni Rona. may mga expectation para sa mga kasama sa Zoom session, meeting. Ilan na po ay tungkol sa attendance. Inaasahan po sa mga kasama na papasok ng 15 minuto bago ang actual na session. Meron po kaming dress code. Kanina po ako ay naka-stripe. Nabasa ko dun sa rule nga pala na bawal ang naka-stripe. Saka yung mga printed na medyo nagsusumigaw. So dito po tayo sa medyo solid na color. So para lang po hindi rin maingay. Matagal po tayong titingin sa screen. Importanteng medyo malamig sa mata naman yung ating mga kasuotan. Bagaman hindi natin masisiguro, hiniling sa mga kasama na maging maayos ang internet signal. At bukod sa internet, may mga pa-ring light po tayo. Binigyan po natin ng mga kasamang fellow ng maliit na ring light. Kasama po yan sa ating kit. Courtesy of, siyempre sa ating suporta sa UP Diliman. Yung mga kasunod po na bilin ay bilin na rin po para doon sa mga nanonood. Kung sakaling hindi nyo nakita yung ating schedule, nabanggit ng bahagya ni Sir Joey sa kanyang pananalita. Pero ulitin ko na lamang na ang daloy po ng ating live stream sessions, bukod dun sa isang extension lecture, ay ganito po. So sa umpisa, mayroon tayong isang moderator, isa po siyang kasama natin sa UP Institute of Creative Writing. Siya po ay magbibigay ng 10 hanggang 15 minuto na pagpapakilala sa manunulat at maglalatag din siya ng anong hinahanap niya sa proyektong ito ng manunulat na nakatanghal sa araw na iyon. At bukod doon ay pwedeng tumutok din siya sa mga particular na aspekto ng akda. Pagkatapos ng kanyang 10 hanggang 15 minuto ng pagpapaliwanag, bibigyan din ng pagkakataon ng ating manunulat upang ibahagi ang kanyang proyekto, ang prinsipyo kung bakit nabuo ang proyekto, mga sinadyang disenyo, politika, nais na punta ng proyekto. At pagkatapos ng kanilang tig-isang 10 hanggang 15 minuto, mayroong natitirang 45 minuto para sa bukas na talakayan kasama ang mga kasama sa Zoom. At yun po, may mga nagbabanday kaming project research assistant sa live feed natin. Pag sa bandang dulo po, meron po tayong medyo nabubulol po ako kasi actually naririnig ko yung mga staff ko sa tenga. kaya po marami po tayong ginagawa ngayon. Pero yun po, kaya medyo nabubulol tayo. So pagkatapos po ng 45 minutes, may taga-check po tayo ng mga komento, tanong, at yun po yung maganda din sa format na ito. May papasok natin sa diskusyon at umaasa tayo na may makakatugon sa mga kasama natin dito sa Zoom session. Pinapaalala po na meron po tayong mga Facebook page ng Likaan. Yung isa ay Likaan sa Facebook. Meron tayong panitikan.ph. Meron tayong UP National Writers Workshop. At yun nga po, parang napakarami, pero nga ang paliwanag na aming director dito, kailangan nating i-exhaust lahat ng available na venue para kung sakaling ma-miss dun sa isang page, pwedeng balikan dito. Kung sakaling bumigay dahil sa dami ng bumibisita sa isang page, pwedeng pumunta sa isa pa. Meron po tayong YouTube page ng Likaan UP Institute of Creative Writing. Nakastream din po yung live sessions natin. Meron po tayong workshop blog. Sana tama yung aking pagkakatanda. Titignan ko lang po yung kodigo para hindi ko makalimutan. 59th upnww.panitikan.ph. Sa Twitter po ay @upnww. Para po sa mga gustong magbigay ng komento sa Twitter o gusto lang gumamit ng ating hashtag, meron po tayong hashtag. Hashtag natin ay UPNWW59. So yan po ang gamitin natin at para din po sa fellows at panelists, gamitin po natin ang hashtag UPNWW59. Meron po tayong secretariat na magchat-chat para sa mga kasama dito na kung ilang oras na natitira. Nabanggit naman po ng ating direktor na si Sir Roland Tolentino na ang UP National Writers Workshop ay isang ligtas na espasyo. Kung sakaling may problema sa tingin nila sa talakayan ay may issue tukol sa pagiging racist o sexist, meron po tayong grievance process na itatawid sa ating mga fellow. Lahat po ng mga poetics pagkatapos ng ating talakayan ay upload sa workshop blog. At may mga larawan din video ng aming mga gawain. Kompletong coverage po ito. Pumayag po ang ating mga fellow at panelists na maibahagi ito sa publiko. Abangan po natin sa dulo, meron po tayong graduation ceremony sa October 23. Pero bago po yan, bukod sa live sessions, mayroon din po tayong extension lecture na tumatalakay sa pagsulat sa panahon ng naglalaban ng mga naratibo. So yun po ang ating daloy sa loob ng 5 araw. Wag po mahiya mag-comment at bigay ng mga tanong sa ating mga nanonood at para sa mga kasama ngayon sa ating workshop, pagbati muli at i-enjoy po natin itong bago at kinakapang karanasan. Magandang araw po sa lahat.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Vlad. Ngayon naman po, bibigyan natin ng pagkakataon, gaya ng nakasanayan sa ating workshop, ay papakinggan natin ang ating mga workshop fellow para sa pagbabahagi nila ng mga inaasahan at hinahanap nila para sa isang linggong bahaginan. Isa-isa nating tatawagin ang workshop fellows upang mapakinggan ang kanilang maiksing mensahe. Simulan po natin sa ating fellow for session 1, Emmanuel Barameda.
Magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Gaya po ng nabanggit ni Dr. Tolentino kanina, mas ganun din ang inaasahan ko na nakatuon ang UP National Writers Workshop sa mismong craft, no, na mayroon tayo. Hindi kagaya noong sa ibang workshop na nauna ko lang napuntahan na nakasentro sa pagpapahusay sa pagsulat ng akda. Dito naman ay mas nakikita ko na nakasentro doon sa mismong pinoproyekto. Kaya nga bago sa akin itong mga consultation at mga breakout session na hindi ko pa nakikita sa ibang workshop na aking napuntahan. Kaya ako ay umaasa na malaki ang maitutulong ng workshop na ito sa pagtatapos ng proyektong aking sinusulat at sa iba pang planong sulat. Salamat po.
Maraming salamat po. Punta naman po tayo sa ating session 2 fellow na si Glenn Diaz.
Hello, magandang umaga po sa lahat. Tulad ng nabanggit ni Eman, medyo ganun din, no? Parang yung huling workshop ko ay hindi ko na matandaan, parang 7-8 years ago. Tapos, yun nga, so interesting yung format ng workshop na project yung tinitignan. Feeling ko yun nga, at this stage in my project, parang mas interesting yung mga komento tungkol dun sa kabuuan. Although, of course, dahil excerpt lang din yung nabigay, no? Actually, I would also appreciate kahit yung nitty-gritty na mga komento sa pagpapabuti, pagpapaunlad ng manuscript. Yun lang po. Salamat.
Salamat, Glenn Diaz. Tawagin naman po natin Session 3 Fellow, Johanna Michelle Lim.
Hello po, good morning. So, same din with Eman and Glenn, no, na the workshop that I attended before, medyo a little more personality-based pa. Kasi of course, siguro we were still trying to find our identity as writers. So, ngayon, baka going to be, my expectation would be it's going to be a little more output-based. You're going to focus more on the work at hand. So, happy din ako na I'll have a different mindset and different perspective then coming from fellow writers. So, yes, I'm very open to critique and yung mga constructive na nuances in between sa mga conversations natin. Salamat.
Salamat po. Sunod naman ay Session 4, Fellow Maynard Manan.
Magandang umaga po sa lahat. Una, gusto ko magpasalamat sapagkat natuloy ang workshop sa kabila ng sitwasyon at sa pagkakataon pong ibinigay ninyo sa amin dito na mailapit pa rin po sa totoong format nito kung gagawin natin ito ng harapan. Para po sa ekspektasyon, nasabi naman po nung unang tatlo, siguro sususugan ko na lang na siguro exciting po ito para sa akin sapagkat siguro in terms po nung dynamics na mangyayari dahil nga kung dati-rati sa mga unang workshop na nadaluhan namin ay mas, yun na nga yung nabanggit kayo na sa mga unang pananalita na may nauuwi minsan sa pagsisermon. Ngayon talaga ay mas tutok doon sa sa proyekto. Hiling lang po sana na pagkatapos nito ay talaga may mabuong komunidad ng manunulat sa pagitan na rin po ng mga co-fellows at pagkakaibigan na rin. Salamat po.
Maraming salamat. Sunod po ay Session 5 Fellow Jonely Reynes Santos.
Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Ako po ay nagagalak at lubos na nagpapasalamat na maging bahagi dito sa workshop na ito. At kagaya rin ng mga sinabi ng mga nauna na, I look forward to learning and learning from everyone. I'm sigurado akong marami akong matututunan, pero higit doon, nilulook forward ko yung mapag-usapan yung naisulat ko kasi ako mismo marami rin ako mga pag-aalinlangan sa mga ginagawa ko. So natutuwa ako na yun yung tutok sa palihan na ito na magkakaroon ng pagkakataong talagang maayos ko rin yung aking akda. Gusto ko rin susugan yung sinabi ng nauna sa akin na looking forward din ako na magkakakilanlan yung mga fellows kasi naisip ko yun yung mawawala doon sa sitwasyon natin ngayon as opposed to kung magkakasama tayo sa isang lugar as originally planned. Pero sigurado ako na may magagawa tayong paraan doon. So maraming salamat po ulit.
Maraming salamat po, Miss Joji. Next, Session 6 Fellow, Miss Herlyn Alegre.
Sorry, na-commute pala ako. Magandang araw po sa lahat. Unang-una, nais ko pong pasalamatan ang organizers dahil mahirap mag-organize ng isang ng ganitong klaseng workshop na hindi magkakitaan ang mga tao sa personal, sa yung mga instructions, no? Ang daming dapat na isaalang-alang. Gusto ko rin pasalamatan personally si Sir Roland Tolentino dahil siya ang nag-invite sa akin para mag-apply dito sa likhaan workshop. Honestly, hindi ko po alam na may ganitong workshop po pala para sa mga writers. At saka bilang scriptwriter po ay napakalungkot na ang maging isang manunulat dahil nag-iisa ka lang, wala kang kabatuhan o ano. Isang magandang opportunity po ito para sa aming lahat na mga nagsisimula o nasa mid na po ang career na makakilala pa ng iba't ibang mga manunulat at nakuha ng mga lessons at wisdom from mga batikanan ng mga manunulat. So, po. Salamat.
Maraming salamat po. Sunod naman po natin na fellow ay Session 7 Fellow, si Miss Raissa Fal.
Okay, excuse me, ma'am, now. Thank you. Mute, guys. Thank you. Sorry. I'm just taking care of the background noise here. Thanks. Yeah, ma'am, now. Thanks. Okay, hi. I'm thinking of what to say before all this now to remember again. Yes. Hi. Sorry about that. Yes, you can see that it would really, it would really be helpful to have a workshop in the traditional way where you can actually get away and go someplace nice back. Getting ready na nga to request Tin Lao. Hi, Tin will be my roommate and all that. But at least we all still get together and we're able to share this experience. And, I can still get my son's breakfast in the morning. Okay. And so it's nice to see old and new faces and to get to know all your new works. Okay. So hi, thank you.
Ms. Raissa.
Yes.
So, session 8, Ms. Christine Lau.
Gandang umaga. Nagpapasalamat po ako sa likhaan, ICW, sa pagkakataong ito. Napakagandang oportunidad po para sa aming mga manunulat ngayon. Ang inaasahan ko, sana tulad ni Maynard, Honee at Johnny Lee, sana magkaroon ako ng mga bagong kaibigan. Kasi nga malungkot ang nag-iisa, lalo na ngayon na nagsusulat ka ng mag-isa. Inaasahan ko rin na makapulot ako ng mga bagong ideya, hindi lang tungkol sa aking proyekto. Importante po yun, pero naghahanap din po ako ng mga bagong ideya ukol din sa pakikipagsapalaran bilang manunulat sa panahon ng nagbabagang mga naratibo. So, salamat po.
Salamat po. Session 9 Fellow Herlyn Alegre.
Hello, good morning. I'm very excited to be here at the same time, super nervous. Thank you so much po for the opportunity to be here. It means so much to me to participate in an event like this, being based overseas. So mahalaga po sa akin na to stay rooted and grounded sa local writing community. So I feel like this is a very important opportunity for me. And as what the other fellows have already said, I look forward sa mga feedback on my work. This is the first time actually that I am letting other people read my personal essays. So I feel very vulnerable. So apart from the personal essays that I wrote for my classes sa CW way back, mga more than a decade ago. So I look forward to the comments, and it's great to see familiar faces. Mga former professors, and at the same time, mas nakakakaba because they are very familiar people. And also great to see familiar faces among my co-fellows. It is also important for me to read the works of my cohorts. So I feel like this is a very good opportunity rin na yun nga, to stay grounded din sa local community and to see kung ano yung mga sinusulat din ng mga iba pang writers who are based in the Philippines. Because sometimes also we have also different narratives or different themes also dito sa ibang bansa. So yun lang po. And also maybe another expectations or maybe a request is maybe we can get some pointers also on, for example, local publications. So having these projects, kumbaga, where can we submit these works, or ano yung mga opportunities for us to publish, maybe independent publishers or opportunities for self-publishing. These are things that, for example, I am not very familiar. So it will be very helpful also to tackle some things like that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Herlyn. Let's have Session 10 Fellow Emmanuel Dumlao.
Magandang araw po sa lahat. Maraming salamat sa likhaan. At kahit thunders na ako, halos kasing tanda ko na yung mga expert dito, napagbigyan pa ako dito. Inaasahan ko po na sa pamamagitan ng bukas nating talakayan at pagbabahagi na ng karanasan at pananaw ay maitawid ko na ang nobela na tinangka kong sulatin. Inaasahan ko na pagkatapos nito ay mababasa na ng publiko ang tungkol sa tawak, ang taong ipinanganak na may kakambal na ahas. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat po. Let's have session 11 fellow, Kate Osayas.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for accepting me in this workshop. I've never actually been in any workshop. I have never formally studied fiction or literature. The last literature class I took was in high school. So I really don't know what to expect. What I do hope for is to learn more about everyone, and in so doing, learn more about myself. And of course, I also want to create new friends and deepen more relationships. It's a very lonely thing writing, and more so in the pandemic. People have been saying that. And that's the thing I would have wanted, like many of the other fellows have mentioned. It would have been wonderful if we could have been somewhere else to kind of bond and be together and talk about something else aside from work, which is what I've been doing a lot recently. So I'm excited and I'm nervous and I'm looking forward to everything.
Maraming salamat po, Ms. Kate Osayas. And last but not least, session 12 fellow, Patrick Tabada.
Hi po. Thank you po sa opportunity na mapasali dito. And first ko mag-aral ng isang writing workshop na hindi exclusive for screenwriting. So I look forward and excited rin ako sa iba't ibang perspective para ma-improve yung work ko. Thank you.
Maraming salamat sa ating mga kasamang manunulat, ang ating workshop fellows. Ngayon naman, bibigyan natin ng pagkakataon ng ating workshop panelist na ibahagi sa atin ang kanilang mga inaasahan sa palihang ito. Sa partikular po ay sasabihin nila ang kanilang mga inaasahan sa isang malikhaing akda, ang mga nakikita nilang hamon para sa mga manunulat na may tatak na advanced writer, at ang posibleng ambag ng panulat lalo sa panahon ng pandemya. Pakinggan po natin sila. Simulan po natin kay Session 1 Moderator, Sir June Cruz.
Okay, reading ako. Pagsusori agad, yung lugar ko kasi mahina signal. Kaya pagka nag-iingay dito, bangka yun. Pag nagpunta naman ako ng lugar na tahimik, wala namang signal. So, ang tawag ko ron ay Third World Workshop. Ayan, no? Narinig niyo yan? Background music ko yan. Okay. Oops. Ang pagsusulat sa akin, isang anyo ng komunikasyon, kwentuhan. Mahalaga yung kwentuhan. Una, hindi ako makikipag-usap sa hindi ko kakilala. Kaya sa akin, yung pag nagbasa ako ng akda, isang anyo ng pagpapakilala na sa dulo, magiging kaibigan ko yung akda, pati yung manunulat. Para mangyari yun, uulitin ko, hindi kita kakausapin kung stranger ka. Pero kung kaibigan ka, habang buhay tayong mag-uusap. Ang una kong hinahanap, pag nagbasa ako ng alinmang akda, ano ba gusto mong sabihin sa akin? Yung dahil ang pagsusulat nga ay komunikasyon, kung gino-joke mo lang ako o one time mo ko o kukwentuhan mo ko na masarap kang kumain, masarap kang matulog, siguro tatawanan lang kita, ngingitian kita. Pero kung seryoso na naghahanap ka talaga ng kausap, na meron ka talagang gustong kausap sa akin, uulit-ulitin kitang basahin hanggang maintindihan kita. Kung boring naman talaga yung pinababasa mo sa akin, parang contest lang sa palangka, gano'n, parang sa journal, o kung sabihin natin, yung tao, burara, kung boring ka, edi hanggang kinakausap kita, titingnan ko lang ng titingnan yung relo ko, hanggang finally, naantok na ako, tutulugan na kita. Dahil sa papel tayo nag-uusap, yung bawat moment, kasi artist din ako, hanggang ngayon pala, hanggang pag nakayuko ako, nag-a-art ako nun kasi nabubura ko pag wala akong ginagawa. Yung bawat moment na kinukwento ko sa akin, gustong makita ng isip ko. Yung bawat chapter na sinasabi mo sa akin, gustong masundan ng isip ko. Gusto ko ring makita yung lugar. Kapag nagawa mo yon, palagay ko ang galing-galing mo. Pero pagka yung nagbabasa ako, ba't ang dami kong problema, binabasa lang naman kita. Hindi naman kita inaano, hindi naman kita kagalit. Ba't mo ako pinahihirapan, no? Ayoko ng ganon. Gusto kong magkaintindihan. Pag wala ito, tinatamad ako makipag-usap sa akda. Ang huling hahanapin ko, yung unang sinabi ko, komunikasyon ito. Tapos yung anyo ng pag-usap. Yung pangatlo, ano man ang gusto mong sabihin, hindi naman kailangan yung diretso mong sasabihin. Ang huling hinahanap ko, nasabi mo ba? Kasi kung tulayan, hanggang dito lang talaga masasabi mo. Kung yan ay maikling kwento, hanggang 10 papel lang talaga, more or less, ang masasabi mo. Pagka yung nasabi mo naman, at pinag-isip mo ako, natutuwa ako noon, nakangiti na ako noon. Tapos, maganda ba yung pagkakasabi mo? Yung kasi may anyo naman talaga, may yung bawat genre na sinusundan tayo. Kapag yung tinapos kita ng mula title hanggang period ng last word, yes, tropa na tayo. Yes, kaibigan kita. Yes, aabangan ko yung mga susunod mo pang akda. Pero dahil ito pang midterm career, inaasahan kong magiging magkakaibigan tayong lahat after this session. Siguro ang panghuling sasabihin ko lang, dahil ako yung naunang salita, pwede ba relax lang kayo? Alam ko jittery kayo, may anxiety kayo, no? May pandemya pa. Ang gawin nyo na lang, magtabi kayo ng kape dyan. Tapos ako, ano pa yung magtabi kayo masarap na pagkain para masaya tayo hanggang nagkukwentuhan. June Cruz Reyes po, kaibigan nyo sa kanila.
Salamat po, Sir June. Let's have session 2 moderator, Sir Butch Dalisay.
Magandang umaga sa inyo lahat. Very pleasant morning to all of you. I'm glad to be here. I'll just have a short piece to say, and I'll begin with something that one of my own writing mentors kept telling us, which is for you to write the story that only you can write. So I'm looking for something that comes out of your own experience. I don't mean that necessarily in an autobiographical way, but something that that draws on our experience as Filipinos, as shared with the broader world, something that speaks of us to us. I'm also looking for work that takes risks, that does not merely, I mean, again, as going back to what Fran said, if somebody else can do that story that same way, why even bother? So there must be a certain edge to your story. But having taken a risk, I expect you to pull it off, which is not going to happen every time. Writing is full of dead ends, even in my own experience. So I do expect you to go out on some kind of ledge and take a leap of faith with your work. I will be quite particular about technique, and we'll go to that in our discussion later today. I look forward to the consultations later today with those who will be consulting with me. Please come prepared with questions, and let's have fun despite everything. I mean, God knows we need relief and refuge from everything around us. Salamat.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Butch. Let's have moderator of session 3, Ma'am Cristina Pantoja Hidalgo.
There. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to see all of you. This enforced isolation has been pretty terrible for all of us, I think. And so it's wonderful that we're all together here, even if it's virtual. Talking about what I expect from the works that we are going to be workshopping, I'd like to tell you that I am open to all kinds of material and all experiments in craft. I ask only that you be yourselves aware of what you are doing and why you are doing that. Technical devices, as you know, are useful only if they contribute toward your objectives. So I expect that you know who you are writing for. In other words, that you are writing for someone else and not just for yourself. And I expect that you have deliberately chosen those techniques because you feel that they are appropriate ones for your ends and that they help you achieve those ends. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Jing. Next, we have our moderator for session 4, Sir Vim Nadera.
Magandang umaga po. Magandang buhay. Kaya tayo nagpapahayag ng sarili dahil may gusto tayong ilad. Kaya tayo nagsusulat, di ba? Anong ibig mong gustong sabihin? Anong ibig nating sabihin? Sa English, dalawang ibig sabihin ito. What do we want to say? O what do we mean? Paano natin ibig sabihin? Pabigkas ba o pasulat? Kung pasulat, technical ba o malikhain? Kung malikhain, tula ba o tuluyan? Kung tula, may tugma at sukat ba o malayang taludturan? Kung tuluyan, sanaysay ba? Kwento ba? Dula ba? Kung sanaysay, anong uri ng sanaysay? Formal ba o informal? Quantitative ba o qualitative? Kung kwento, anong uri ng kwento? Dagli ba? Flash ba? Sudden ba? Maikli ba? Noveleta ba o nobela ba? Pambata ba? Pang-young adult ba? O pang-matanda? Romantiko ba? Realistiko ba? Radical ba? O sci-fi ba? Speculative ba? O futuristic ba? Kung dula, anong uri ng dula? Ritual ba? Isang yugto ba? O ganap ang haba? Straight ba? Dance drama ba? O interactive? Kung pelikula, docu ba? Feature ba? O experimental? Paano mo ito sinasabi? Kung di naman, o naman pasulat, paano kung patanghal? Anong wika ang ginagamit mo? Tama ba ang balarila, baybay, o banta? Sa English, GSP, grammar, spelling, punctuations. Ang mga nabanggit ko ay bahagi lamang ng anyo. Yan ano naman ang nilalaman. Dito pumapasok ko anong gusto mong sabihin o sinasabi. Committed ba ang literatura mo o kumikitid? Kung ang una, anong ibig mo pa rin sabihin? May kinalaman ba ito sa uri, mayaman versus mahirap, o ari, lalaki versus babae, LGBTQIA, meaning at iba pa? O lahi, puti versus may kulay, Black Lives Matter ba? O Brown Lives Matter? Pari, Kristiyano versus di Kristiyano, at dinadagdag ko ito yung hari, malakas versus mahina, at iba pa, gagaya na may sakit at may kapansanan, bata at matatanda. Dito, isusulong ko ang aking kwanismo, anong ibig mong sabihin. Yan, lalo nang may pandemya, kung napatunayan natin hindi pala tayo para sa panitikan, gamitin na lang natin ang sining bilang galing o pampagaling o healing o hilom. Yun lang. Ibang expressive arts therapy sa arts workshop. Gaya nito, para sa sarili mo ba ito o para sa iba? Pero maaari pa nating subukan o subukin ang pagpapahayag ng sarili sa tulong ng iba pang sining. Yan ang sayaw, musika, teatro, pelikula, fotografiya, arkitektura, sining visual, sining computer o digital. Habang may buhay, may sining. Habang sining may buhay, at habang may buhay, mabuhay. Siya nga pala, teka muna, hindi porke tapos na yung pre-writing o yung research mo at ang writing na isulat mo na gaya nito, ayos na. Kasi meron pang ikatlong yugto. Ito yung post-writing. Kaya tuloy po kayo sa mundo ng revision o revision. Basta, walang bibitaw, walang bibitiw. Simula pa lang ito para iparinig ang iyong tinig. Salamat sa lahat.
Salamat po, Sir Vim. Let's have our Session 5 moderator, Ms. Ana Sanchez.
Magandang umaga. So ako si Ana Sanchez, nagsusulat ako ng fiction at non-fiction. Isa ako dun sa dalawang medyo junior na miyembro ng ICW. As such, actually baka ilan, kung hindi marami, sa inyo ay baka kasing edad ko o mas matanda pa sa akin. No? Pwera na lang kay Herlyn na naging estudyante ko pa sa CW 110 Fiction Workshop noong unang panahon. Na? So ang gusto ko lang ang napakagulo kasi ng panahon ngayon, no? So now and even before, ang lagi kong hinahanap sa isang akda ay method in madness, no? Yung sabi nga ni Shakespeare, dahil lang ang buhay ay magulo. At nagsusulat ako para magkaroon ito ng order, no? Para maintindihan ko siya. So instinctively yun ang hinahanap ko sa isang akda. Kahit na halimbawa magulo, kunyari yung form ng akda, deliberate ba ito? No? Crafted ba ito ayon sa isang intention? So maliban dun sa intention, no, naghahanap ako ng execution, no? Kailangan meron pareho, no? Kasi kung maganda nga yung intention pero yung execution kulang, hindi rin talaga nagiging successful yung akda. At huli, naghahanap ako ng self-reflexivity, no? Lalo na sa ganitong level ng workshop. Basically, yun nga, alam ba natin yung gusto natin gawin? Alam ba natin kung para kanino natin ito ginagawa? No? At meron ba tayong sapat na open-mindedness, no, at willingness to listen to others and to revise para talagang mapagbuti yung pagsusulat natin, no? At lalo na itong mga full-length na projects natin. Yun lang po.
Maraming salamat po, Ma'am Ana. Let's have Session 6 moderator, Sir Roland Tolentino.
Wala naman ba question na siguro na at this stage of the game, of the writing game, may mastery na tayo over the craft, which means that ang hanapin ko na ngayon ay a kind of innovation or innovativeness in terms of both form and content. No? Which means that may konti bang excitement in terms of the experimentation, at least at an attempt to experiment with the form, or kind of pushing the envelope, not the most convenient way of storytelling, of composing a poem, etc. No? So ibig sabihin, a kind of edginess, I suppose, no? Lalo na dito nga sa second book project nyo or sa second project nyo, we're looking for something that can stir up newer imaginations. So it cannot be a rehash of the old, but it has something, yun yung incumbency ng moment na we have to write something new. The second thing I'm looking for is kind of newer sociality. Social relations we have not uncovered in the past, or social relations in the time of pandemic na mas online, or recognition of faces via masks, etc. No? Parang ganun lang. Or a kind of light at the end of the tunnel sa panahon ng pandemic, wherein that light is not yet recognizable at this time. So how might a writer imagine that kind of condition? No? So pag may ganung klaseng discussion of a sociality, then we also look for a kind of newer politics in the characters, or in the storytelling, or in the craft itself. No? So ibig sabihin, may bago bang sinasabi tungkol sa human experience, or social relations, or even the nation. Especially if one is opted to write a novel or a film that draws a lot of a lot of parallelism with the real political, social world that is out there in the country. So yun ang aking hanapin.
Salamat po, Sir Roland. Now let's have our speaker for extension lecture, national artist Herlyn Alegre. Let's first have Sir Eugene Evasco.
Hello, magandang umaga sa ating lahat. Nagpapasalamat ako sa lahat ng mga fellows dahil sa pagkakataon na maipakita nyo sa akin yung kumbagay parang ultrasound no, ng inyong ipapanganak na mga akda. Ang hinahanap ko sa para sa palihan ito ay apat. No? Yung una, nagmula kasi ako sa isang napakaliit na espasyo na 65 square meters. Kaya medyo para unfair na hahanapin ko sa mga akda ninyo yung mga akda na aaliwin ako at palalawakin yung aking mundo. No? Na sisikapin itong ipakita sa akin na meron pa palang kinabukasang dapat hintayin ang mundo natin. Pangalawa, napansin ko rin sa panahon ng pandemya, no, sa mga online mga webinar, na bago ka bigyan ng e-certificate, tinatanong sa'yo, ano ba ang mga takeaway mo? No? Yung, ano ba ang nakuha mo no, sa mga lekturang ito? So, yun din ang hanapin ko sa mga akda. No? Ano ba yung mapupulot ko sa inyong mga akda? Ano ba ang mga takeaway, yung hashtag takeaway na to? No? Pangatlo ay, naghahanap din ako ng mga akda na sisikapin na wasakin ang mga definition ng mga anyong pampanitikan. Mga sanaysay na hindi ayaw magpatawag na sanaysay, mga tula na pagkakamalun mong parang kwento, o kaya mga nobela o mga kwentong bayan na pagdududahan mo kung ano ba ang pinagmulan nitong tradisyon o ano ba pinagmulan nitong mga kwento. At ikaapat, bilang guro ng mga kabataan sa pagsusulat at sa pagbabasa, inaasahan ko o hanapin ko sa mga akda yung mga kung paano nito hikayatin ang kabataan ngayon na tangkilikin, basahin, panoorin, at subaybayan ang mga panitikang Filipino. Maraming salamat po muli.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Eugene. Let's have Session 7 moderator, Sir Charlson Ong.
Hey, good morning. You see me? Yung advantage siguro nung huli na nagsasalita ay nabanggit na lahat. No? Mostly yung mga naunang speakers. So, ano naman na yung mga nahanap nila? Nahanap ko na rin. At this point, I'm looking for some ambition, some boldness, intrigue me, spin my head. Don't be predictable. Try to do something new. Yun lang.
Salamat mo, Sir Charlson. Next naman po ay si Sir Hemino Abad, ang ating moderator for Session 8. Sir Jimmy, paki-unmute na lang po ang ating mic. Maraming salamat po.
Jimmy, you are on mute. We cannot hear. You're on mute.
Kindly open your mic, Sir Jimmy. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. As I was saying, one works alone when you are writing, but you are one in spirit with all writers. Yeah. Now, you might say that there are many kinds of literary or imaginative works because the imagination has infinite possibilities. Any literary or creative work, so called, is work of language and work of imagination. Both work, language, and imagination working in concert. That is your language that you have an adequate mastery of, and that means your own imagination. Now, any literary work, so-called, whatever the kind, consists of three parts. One, paksa or topic. What is that? That is a human experience all the time. The experience, whether as lived or as imagined. That is the paksa. So that Franz Arceliana would always say, get real. Now, the second part, qualitative part of any literary work is what we call saysay. We mean by saysay significance, meaning, the sense. What is the sense of that experience? And the third qualitative part of the literary work is what we can call diwa. Diwa is a fantastic word in Tagalog. It means soul. What is the soul of that work of language and work of imagination that is your story or poem or play or whatever you want to call it, or creative nonfiction, the personal essay, whatever it is that you are doing, what is the diwa, the soul, the meaningfulness of that experience as imagined or as lived? Yeah. So I guess that is all that you have to say, that I have to say, although I would also say to the reader of your work, I will also say, as you read, you are also read. So read well, because reading is also work of language and work of imagination. You and I are partners in the reading, the author and the reader. Okay, that's all I have to say. By the way, I requested, and I'm sure the ICW staff has distributed it to all the fellows. I wrote a short essay on poetics. Well, that's how I understood poetics anyway in that essay. It's only 6 pages, so I hope you can take the time to read it. Thank you very much, and I think I will enjoy this workshop.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Jimmy. Let's have our moderator naman po for session 9, Sir Ramon Guillermo.
Magandang umaga sa ating lahat, lalo na sa ating mga kalahok ng ating workshop ngayong taon. May lang ang aking mensahe. Ang inaasahan ko mula sa ating papag-aralan at susuriin na panitikan ay yung hindi inaasahan, yung bago, yung naglalaman ng kaisipan na yumayanig sa ating mga pinaniniwalaan. Napakahalaga nito para sa panahon ng pandemya, sa panahon ng krisis na ating kinapapalooban ngayon. Ang inaasahan ko naman para sa ating palihan ay ang pagkakaibigan. Napakahalaga nito kapag ordinaryong palihan, nagkasama-sama tayo, yung ating mga fellows ay nagiging minsan nagiging lifelong friends. Kasama din ng ating mga ang ating mga panelists. Sayang nga lang at walang ganitong pagkakataon ngayon. Pero sa kabila ng ganitong mga kondisyon, sana ay magkaroon ng malalim at pangmatagalang pagkakaibigan sa pagitan nating lahat, sa pagitan ng ating mga fellows, at ito ay magtuloy-tuloy hanggang sa darating pang mga taon sa pagunlad ng ating panulat. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Bomen. Let's have our moderator for Session 10, Ma'am Luna Sikat Cleto.
Magandang umaga sa inyo. Kinabahan ako kanina, baka lumampas na yung panahon ko kasi merong dumating na tao. Pero gaya nga ng gusto kong sabihin sa inyo ngayong umaga, ang panulat naman natin ay puno ng mga interruption at disruptions. Pero nagagawa nating balikan, nagagawa nating tumutok, nagagawa nating tapusin. At kung naniniwala si Ana na merong method to the madness, ang gusto ko namang idiin ay naghahanap tayo ng mga boses ng katinoan sa panahon ng kabaliwan. Ang dami-daming mga bugok sa ating paligid na naghahari. Kailangan natin para hindi naman to grandstanding Sa palagay ko ay may sapat na pandinig kayo para maunawaan ninyo ang ibig kong sabihin. Ayaw na ayaw ko rin sa ganitong mga palihan ang posisyon na para bang nasa akin yung huling salita. Kaya sa tuwing may palihan, ito yung pinaka-iniiwasan kong bahagi kasi sino ba ako para magsabi na ito ang maayos? Samantalang sa tunay na praktika, lagi kang napapatda, natitigilan ka. Pero ang isang katangian ng isang totoo na artista, sa alam ko itutuloy niya pa rin. Kamukha ng, halimbawa, yung washing machine namin nasira, kailangan palitan ng memory card. Diba ganun din naman tayo kapag nagsusulat? Kailangan nating maging bukas na palitan ang ating mga memory card. Or kailangan nating tanggapin na wala palang transmission ng kuryente sa ating mga currents. So, yun na lang siguro at mas gusto ko na natutuklasan ko rin kung ano ang aking sasabihin habang tayo'y nagpapalihan. Maraming salamat sa inyo at inaasahan kong matututo rin ako sa inyo.
Maraming salamat po, Ma'am Luna. Let's have our Session 12 moderator, Sir Vlad Gonzales.
No po, ito naman ako. Marami naman nasabi na, so sangayon ako sa lahat. Sa puntong ito ng buhay manunulat, ang namimiss ko naman palagi ay yung mga panahon na puso-puso lang yung sulatan ba. Tapos nasa punto rin kasi tayo na may mga naisulat na tayong ilang mga gawa at na-bring up na nga yung may sense of design, intention at iba pa, may pagkamalinis. At kahit na maraming napagtatagumpayan yung, siyempre malinaw yung intention, malinaw yung disenyo, alam mo kung paano i-execute. Minsan na may mismo yung mga panahon na sasabihan pa na hilaw ka pa pero maraming puso. At siguro, lalo na sa panahon ng pandemya, ang gusto ko sigurong hanapin ngayon ay yung pag-amin ng mga kasamang manunulat na gaya ko ay medyo clueless din sila minsan sa anong direction ba yung dapat, yung well-designed ba o yung magaspang pero maraming damdamin. So yung struggle na mahanap yung tumpak na balanse, yun siguro yung hahanapin ko sa isang linggo. Tapos nitong huli, kahit nung nakaraang taon sa workshop, isa sa na-enjoy ko pag nagbabasa, yung mga pagkakataon na, di ba minsan may ganoon tayo yung kahit na insignificant detail, ligayang-ligaya tayo kasi naipasok natin for some reason. So yun yung gusto kong hanapin, yung mga bahagi ng proyekto ninyo na may sense of delight kayo na parang sana makita to ng mga magbabasa itong pinasok kong something, yung pasabog man siya o maliit na detalye. Pag nahanap ko yun at natukoy, alam ko matutuwa rin yung manunulat. So parehas tayong matutuwa. So sana maging masinsin din kami para makita yung mga maliit at malaking pasabog ninyo sa mga akda ninyo.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Vlad. Susubukan po natin ulit si Sir Rio Almario.
Wanted na ako. Ito na ako.
Sir Rio. Last but not the least, our national artist, Sir Rio. Makiki-open na lang po ng inyong camera, please. Sige po, mamayang hapon na lang po natin babalikan si Sir Rio Almario. Ngayon naman po ay umpisahan na natin ang unang workshop session. Ang unang session ay ang Bisperas, isang nobela sa Filipino. Ang ating manunulat ay si Ginoong Emmanuel Barameda at si Dr. June Cruz Reyes naman ang kanyang moderator. Gaya ng nabanggit ni Vlad sa umpisa, nagsisimula ang session sa maiksing pagtalakay ng moderator tungkol sa manunulat at sa mga akda. Nasusundan din naman ng pagbabahagi ng manunulat. Itutuloy ang session sa bukas na talakayan mula sa mga kasama sa panel. Paalala lang po sa ating mga kasama na ipapabatid sa ating chat box ang natitirang oras para sa talakayan. Naglalaan din tayo ng ilang minuto sa dulo ng session para sa ilang tanong o komento na makukuha ng ating staff mula sa live feed ng workshop. Narito na po si June Cruz Reyes.
Magandang umaga ulit. Man, gusto kong makita agad yung mukha mo dyan on screen. Kumusta ka? Ang daming expectation tapos unang session. Palagay ko nakakadagdag yun sa anxiety. Kaya bago ako tumalon doon sa aking pagpapakilala, i-cheer up ko muna si Eman. Eman, expectation nyo namin bilang matatanda. Kayo namang mga bata, meron din naman kayong sariling gustong sabihin. Ganito lang, be yourself. O, para hindi ka kabahan, ngiti ka dyan. On screen ka naman. O, pag nakangiti ka na, kaway-kaway. Tapos, inhale, exhale. Okay. Si Eman, hindi niya alam, sinusundan ko yung kanyang career na nababasa ko siya. Ang irony, hindi ko matandaan talaga ang mukha ni Eman. Dahil si Eman ay hindi ko naman talaga laging nakikita. Nababasa ko yung akda niya sa mga journal, kung saan-saan hindi isang journal, kung saan-saan. Manaka-naka, pagka nagja-judge ako sa palangka, nababasa ko pa din. So alam ko yung kalidad ni Eman. At siguro Eman yung ating pagpapakilala sa akda at saka sa iyo. Gusto ko nasaan yun ang kumustahan dapat early this year magkasama tayo sa isang workshop. Pero talagang itinatago ka ng kalikasan. No? Ayaw ka pa ng kalikasan na magpakita. Nasa Catanduanes ka ba ngayon? Kung nasa Catanduanes ka, alam ko yung mga sinusulat mo. High tide ka ba ngayon dyan? Signal number 3 ka ba dyan? Yung Catanduanes, kaya walang sibilisasyon. Ang gagawa nun, si Eman. Kasi yung sibilisasyon nila, laging tinatangay ng hangin at saka ng baha, ng bagyo. Yung buong Bicol region. Mahirap magpakilala na malimit na uwi sa hyperbole. Kaya yung pagtinignan mo, ang best na pagpapakilala ni Emma na ginawa niya, yung nasa page 57 ng ating workshop kit. Pag tinignan mo yung pagpapakilala niya doon sa kanyang unang libro, kakapurit. Pag sa Facebook, kakapurit pa din. Tapos yung mga nagpapakilala kay Eman, ay tingin ko kahul pa din. Siguro sa akin ang gusto kong ipakilala si Eman sang-ayon sa natatandaan ko, sang-ayon sa kanyang mga akda. Yung binanggit ko kanina, high tide, bagyo, walang kuryente, walang signal. Yun ang mundo ni Eman. Ito rin yung dahilan na ito yung kanyang isusulat. Yung siya ngayon ay naghahanda na para sa kanyang CNF na inaabangan ko rin kasi yung kanyang unang libro na nakakatuwa, unang libro niya ay National Book Award agad. Tapos yung mga workshop niya, galing niya siya sa Ateneo, sa Rogelio, Sikat, at yung mga workshop doon sa kanilang bayan. Yung gusto kong ipakita sa inyo yung kanyang libro. Bili kayo. Ang kapansin-pansin dito, may isang kung ano yung quality ni Eman. Yung kanyang sky blue ay isang bata na gusto mag-aral sa UP, iwanan yung boyfriend. Pero pag binasa mo yung kanyang akda, hindi kwento, tula. Napakagaling. Yung kanya namang Domingo, nandito rin, ay nobela ang scope. Yung scope. So, ibig sabihin, marunong siyang magsulat. Yung sa mga bisperas na kamag-anak nung nandito, ay mukha namang pelikula. Tanong nyo sa Eman kung may mabibili pa nito, bili kayo. Tapos kung tinignan ko yung kanyang poetics at ako ay naglilista, sabi ko, etong tao na to, rare talaga. Malimit kasi pang umpisa na to, nag-workshop na, malimit ang mga manunulat. Ang tawag ko doon, manunulat ng miracle. Yung dinidiscuss niya lang, yung nakikita. Kaya pag nag-brown out, wala nang masabi. Doon sa poetics ni Eman, itinali ko yung mga senses na marami. Bukod sa kanyang mga nakikita na yung kabisado niya na yung mga tiles ng mall, ang dami niya ring naaamoy. So siya ay hindi nakakakita lang, siya ay nakakaamoy din. At ang dami niya ring nasasalat. Gusto ko yung amoy ng pabango ng tiyan niya, yung kanyang mga nahihipo. Ang dami rin. Meron din siyang mga naririnig, mga nadarama. At higit sa lahat, pag sinynthesize niya yung lahat ng senses na yon, anong kaisipan ang nabubuo. At sa gayon ay nagkakatinig ang kanyang mga akda. Natutuwa ako na yung ako yung magmo-moderate dito. Kaya lang ayoko ng una kasi kami yung magsiset ng parang benchmark na nakaka-pressure. Hindi ko rin alam, yun sa mga akda mo, Eman, ikaw ang sasagot ng lahat na to. Total, nagkukwentuhan tayo. Ba't yung mga babae sa mga kwento mo at mukhang sa nobela mo ay panay hindi marunong magluto? At pagkatapos, siyempre nabanggit ko na, laging may kalamidad. So kalamidad na physical na calamity ay yung kalamidad ng emotion doon at kalamidad doon sa buhay ng mga karakter. Natutuwa ako na nakilala ko si Eman sa pamamagitan ng kanyang akda, bagamat manipis lamang ang kanyang daming pumapasok na message kala ko sa kay Rona. Yun lang muna siguro ang gusto kong sabihin. Siguro yung panghuli ron bago ako na-interrupt. Ano na ang anyo ng panitikan mula sa rehiyon? Tingin ko ang pagitan na lamang ay wika. Ang pambansang panitikan ay hindi Pilipino lang o Ingles. Bagamat si Eman ay hindi pa nagsusulat sa Bicol, alam ko mayroon siyang mga pagtatangka ng ganoon. Mga kaibigan sa panulat, ikinararangal kong ipakilala sa inyo at tanggapin ang ating manunulat na isasalang sa unang session, si Emmanuel Barameda. Eman.
Meron naman.
Eman, nawala ka. Walang signal si Eman.
Na? Ayusin lang po saglit.
Mag-a-adlib muna ako. Yung nung una nating planuhin ito, nag-back out si Eman. Ang kanyang dahilan ng pag-back out, walang signal yung isla. Tapos ngayon alam ko merong tropical depression na ba agad dito o kung papasok pa lang ayan. So hindi ko alam kung saan bubong o saan bundok naghahanap ng signal si Eman sa oras na ito.
Sabi ni Eman sa chat group ay nag-brown out daw at inaayos yung generator. So how do we, paano natin ikukuha nito? I-adjust yung schedule.
Ganito na lang, siguro, pagka may kuryente na siya at saka tama yung oras, babalik kami ni Eman. Para hindi maaksaya yung oras, proceed tayo sa session 2 o mag-break muna tayo.
Maraming salamat po, Sir June. Ang gagawin po natin ay mag-proceed po muna tayo sa session 2.
Butch? Glenn?
Ayan po, magpapatuloy po muna tayo sa ikalawang sesyon. Tatalakayin natin ang proyektong nobela sa Ingles na pinamagatang Iniga. Ito ay isinulat ni Glenn Diaz at kasama niya bilang moderator si Dr. Jose Dalisay. Tawagan po natin si Sir Jose Dalisay.
Medyo napaaga pala tayo. At I was jotting some notes here for Glenn's session. So just give me a minute to set things up. Okay. Yeah, Glenn, how are you? Andito ka ba sa Pilipinas? Andito ka?
Yes, sir. Apo.
Okay. Dito ka nagpalipas ng lockdown? You've been here for long?
Since January, sir. Dapat po babalik ng Australia nung August, pero yeah, hindi na tuloy.
Okay. Yeah, Glenn is a former student of mine. I'm very proud to say, and I think few writers of this generation have had as celebrated a debut as Glenn. His first novel, The Quiet Ones, as many of you know, won a trifecta of major awards, beginning with the 2017 Palanca Grand Prize for the novel, followed the following year by the Manila Critics Circle and NBDB National Book Award, and also our Madrigal Gonzalez Best First Book Award. So for a beginning writer and novelist, I think it doesn't get much better than that. And to win all three major writing prizes with your first novel.
Fantastic.
The flip side of that, of course, is that it also sets a very high bar for the person. Because literally, how do you top that? And I'll get to that point later on in my brief introduction. The point being the special challenge of the second novel. Glenn's first novel, as some of you who may have read it will recall, had to do with a fellow named Alvin who was working in a in a BPO, in a call center. And I had the pleasure of seeing this work kind of germinate in my CW class some years ago. And it's always of course, a special privilege for those of us who teach to see such works come to fruition. Another one was smaller and smaller circles, of Ichibatakan, which also began in a class of mine many years ago. So I'm glad to see people like Glenn Adichie kind of finding their own footing and their own themes and their own voice, particularly in the form of the novel, which I would like to devote a few minutes to, because as I've often said before, the novel is really not one of our strongest suits as Filipino writers. There has been a landmark study made of this by Dr. May Hurilia. And she reviewed both novels in Filipino and English, produced over more than the past century, and concluded that quantitatively we are really not a novel writing people compared, for example, to the Indians or the Japanese. Makikita mo naman halimbawa, and of course that also is reflected in the fact that, generally speaking, we are not a nation of readers in the sense that say the Japanese are. Alam naman natin na pagka sumakay ka halimbawa ng subway sa Japan, makikita mo nakabaon lahat yung mga mukha nila sa mga libro, no? Di bali na manga siguro karamihan doon, pero nagbabasa sila sa isang paraan na tayo ay hindi. Lalong-lalo na hindi tayo palabasa ng mga mahabang nobela. We are a nation of short story writers and poets. And I've written a whole piece on this titled Novelists in Progress, which has some theories or ideas about why we find it difficult to write novels. Of course, the lack of incentives is part of that. Dahil ilang taon mong bubunuin yan, ilang sumaswerte ka na kung maglabas ng 1,000 kopya at ang tagal mabenta ng mga kopyang yon. At ang kikitain mo para sa isang buong nobela, sa royalties mo, hindi ka pa makakabili ng kahit isang iPhone. Kaya, bakit ka pa magsusulat ng nobela? Which is why I admire people like Glenn who essay this form, despite its obvious disincentives. And people like him, there are, I remark in my paper that we are also in our literary community, in our literary culture, many of us are so far two novel people, including Jose Rizal, if you don't count Macanisa. Tigdadalawang nobela tayo. Ganun din si Nick Joaquin at ako mismo. Dalawa pa rin lang. Bakit kaya ganun? Ang mga exceptions sa atin, of course, are people like Frankie Sinulose, Luwalhati Bautista, our very own Charleston Ong. May mga ilan pa rin sa ating masipag na bumubuno ng nobela. Now, I said that there is a special challenge to writing the second novel, which I really think of is the real test of your artistry, in a sense, because many of our first novels are, by default, semi-autobiographical. our most insistent, our most important causes, our pet peeves, we deal with these in our first novel. So parang doon mo na binuga lahat. Ano pa ngayon ang isusunod mo dyan? And which is why, for me, again, the second novel is the more interesting measure of where the writer is going and what he or she is capable of, having probably largely expended his or her autobiographical material in the first work. Now, Glenn tells us in his introduction that yes, Iniga, the work that we will be discussing shortly, Iniga does have autobiographical elements. It draws on his childhood in Zambales. It draws on his activist experience, and of course, on some realities, some very grim realities of Philippine society today, especially the existence of such monsters as Jovito Palparan, who figures in this story. I will be asking our fellows and panelists to kind of keep at the back of their minds a couple of technical aspects in looking at Iniga. And the first is the matter of what we might call the narrative line, or maybe even just the plot. Where is it going? Without the benefit of reading Glenn's introduction, would you have had a sense of what was going on? Would you have been interested to see what would ensue from page to page? And do you see a certain narrative logic unfolding, again, without having read the introduction? Is the narrative line clear and compelling enough? Does the style help? You'll note that Glenn's style here is very impressionistic, almost staccato-like. Just working with sentence fragments. He's also highly selective in his scenes. There are highlights that you might expect would be given more dramatic prominence, such as the fire that raises the neighborhood, but somehow it feels muted. Now, these are all authorial choices, and which brings me to the second technical point I'd like you to think about, which is that of the omniscient narrator. Now, we know that this is a third-person account, and there is such a thing, of course, as third-person limited, which actually this largely is or might be. We are looking over the shoulder of Iniga. She is the main figure here, and we know that we will be trailing her throughout the novel, most likely. But over and above this, there hovers an overarching consciousness which now and then does not or cannot resist making certain, shall we say, editorial commentaries. For example, even just in the first paragraph, Glenn says, dazed but also smiling, the remnant, no doubt, of a megalomania that ran unchallenged for too long, and later on the decorated butcher of peasants and activists. So he gives you that straight out. He makes a judgment about the character, which he expects you to accept, to take at face value. Now that is a form of editorializing. Now, I'm not saying that all editorializing is wrong. I'm just saying, I'm sure Glenn knows what he's doing. Is that good or bad for the novel and for the reader to be so early on to be manipulated to a certain attitude towards the material? So these are again some of, shall we say, the kind of advanced writing pointers that I'd like you to think about as authors. It may have been clear to some of you, but again, it bears thinking about when we look at Glenn Diaz's novel, and now I can't wait to listen to what he has to say. And thank you very much. Glenn, all yours.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Sir Butch. Okay. Yeah, I'm so happy that Sir Butch kind of zoned in on very like specific technical or narrative decisions. No, that's really my primary concern. I think for my presentation, I'm not sure if they're setting it up. Very brief presentation. I'll talk about the project, even though I wouldn't really like begin even think about writing fiction until many years later. No, in the intervening years, I would be convinced that counterinsurgency and its violence was a feature and not an aberration of this like, quote unquote democracy, you know, in which we all must live, or whatever political system that we were left with after independence. No? And that being the case, I thought it's a worthy subject worth pursuing, you know, in terms of fiction. Yeah, next slide, please. Just floating off the coast of Masinloc in Zambales. Again, something I mentioned in the introduction, now where my father's family is from. Masinloc is really this small time. I apologize if I gave the impression that I grew up there. I actually was born and raised sadly in Manila. I've been back. I've gone to Zambales maybe a couple of times at most. I'm sorry. No. But yeah, it's a small town, but it entered the news because part of its territory is Scarborough Shoal, no, or Bajo de Masinloc in the West Philippine Sea, which became a site of tension between the U.S. and China. So that's cute. The second headline that became my entry point to this project, was the arrest of Palparan in 2014. He was arrested in a nondescript two-story house above a bakery in Santa Mesa. maybe 10 to 15 minutes away from where I live. No, so I guess production brought the notion of that political experience closer to my own. Both these news items likewise helped in making this otherwise gargantuan like subject matter, quote unquote, real to me, no, in the sense that they conceivably take place in the realm of my concrete and individual experience. No, and in the novel, these two things, no, the appearance of the buoys and the capture, would become key points in the novel, in the manuscript, or in the narrative. Next, please. But the more I read, next slide, please. The more I read about Oplan, Bantaylaya, and Palparano, the more I realized that I had to go back a bit in history. Now, at around this time, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with this, I became really obsessed with this TV show called The Americans. Now, it's about a couple who ran a travel agency, but were in fact special KGB agents based in Washington, D.C. in the 1980s. Now, their missions would range from like planting recording devices at a politician's office to retrieving classified information like about a new technology that the Americans were developing so they could send it back to Moscow. Things like that. Now, all while taking care of their two kids who didn't know that they were like KGB agents and dealing with each other as a sort of real but also fake couple. So I really got into the Cold War period. And what I like most about The Americans is precisely that, that way of subjectifying the Cold War via this very human couple and their relationship. And in the course of thinking things through, I realized that a figure I can use, because my family is from Zambales, is Ramon Magsaysay. So again, perhaps I was searching for another personal route to this amorphous history. So, thinking about it, at first glance, my protagonist has the flimsiest, most contrived connection to the Cold War, such as the fact that her mother loved Magsaysay and so on. But the more I thought about the project, the more I realized that her connection to the Cold War is actually quite profound. After all, she is from the Philippines, and we all have to live in capitalism, a deplorable fact that is a direct repercussion of the Cold War. Next, please. So just a bit about the process. To add meat to the Cold War and Zambales coordinates, a big chunk of my reading went into the relationship between Magsaysay, parang this famous relationship between Magsaysay and CIA operative Edward Lansdale, who is conventionally seen in history as the architect of Magsaysay the Hook Vanquisher and Magsaysay the People's President. Among the materials I read are from the so-called Lansdale papers, the trove of declassified memos and reports and documents that revealed the extent of this relationship. It revealed, for instance, how Lansdale and Magsaysay would discuss strategies to quell the Hook Rebellion in the house of the then Defense Secretary in Sampaloc, interestingly not far from where Palparan would be arrested, half a century later. With someone's help, I also gained access to intelligence reports from the forerunner of the CIA, the US Army Intelligence Group, from the late 40s to the early 50s, which gave me a good sense of the extent to which the US monitored quote-unquote political activity in the Philippines. These things range from infiltrating labor groups to like following Russian prostitutes in Manila, which is really interesting. Aside from academic history, I also read a bunch of memoirs by and biographies of former CIA agents, such as Joseph Burkholder Smith, who revealed in so many words that every single Philippine president since Magsaysay had to be quote-unquote approved by the Americans. But of all the things I've encountered, I was most struck, I think, by a tiny book called Counter Guerrilla Operations, the Philippine Experience. It's conventionally classified as military strategy and somehow available in my university library in Australia. It was written by CIA operative Charles T.R. Bohannan and Magsaysay advisor Napoleon Valeriano. Essentially books. No, and interesting in 2000. Flash forward to 2000, before Karen and Shea were abducted, a PowerPoint presentation traced to the Armed Forces Intelligence Service leaked to the public. And it claimed that there was a supposed quote-unquote international human rights campaign being waged by the Communist Party of the Philippines, and in something that would be very familiar to the Filipinos today, it listed a number of progressive groups that the security sector considers quote-unquote echelons of alliances or so-called front organizations for the CPP. So aside from the usual suspects like Bayan, included were entities like PCIJ, CBCP, and even the Salvation Army. No? So the title of that leaked presentation is Knowing the Enemy. And I thought it was so interesting that that title is also a title of a chapter in the Counter Guerrilla Operations book, from 50 or so years ago, from the Cold War. So this continuity in state policy in terms of counterinsurgency is a sort of animating spirit behind Iniga. So I think I'm more or less clear about the politics of the background of the project. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm most curious about, and what is most helpful to me at this point, is how that politics is registering in the excerpt. I mean, down to the sentences, as Sir Butch mentioned, and so on. And whether it's registering in an interesting way or in an obtrusive way or what have you. I asked this. I have a first draft of the thing. But the only person, aside from a couple of friends, the only person who had read the entire thing so far is my PhD supervisor in Australia, who is white, who is not Filipino. And because I've written it in the context of an academic program in Australia, I'm just wary of how my narrative choices could have been influenced by that context. Again, something that Sir Butch alluded to, another concern I have is regarding that subject matter and subject position of the protagonist. Because compared to my first book, this isn't really like quote unquote my experience in the fullest sense of that word. So that's also a concern that I have, that sense of getting things right. Even the fact that my main character is a woman. And of course there are unique psychological or experiences or to her that I will never be privy to. So that's another. So basically, my concern is whether the huge politics is translating well or productively, at least in the writing. Yun lang. Thank you.
Okay. I think Glenn has given us a lot to think about there. He spoke mainly about the sources of his material and of his thinking. But again, let's remember that what he is also interested in is how well this is playing out in the narrative in front of us. And I do have a few more things to say, but I'd really rather hear from everyone else before I jump back into the nitty-gritty of this piece. So can we have a time check? How much time do we have left for discussion?
We have 45 minutes, sir. 45.
Are we not running over time, Deepa?
It's okay, sir. We have 45 minutes allocated for the discussion po talaga.
All right. Okay. Who'll take first stab at this?
I will.
Yes, Jimmy. Jimmy, can't hear you. Unmute, please. Unmute.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Any text whether it is short or long, is if you look up the word text in the dictionary, all it means is a word weave. A word weave. So when Booth says, reflect on the plot of the novel, the narrative logic, and so forth, well, what you are really asking is how are the things that are imagined or that are lived by the author are woven together so that they make one whole, which you can now call the novel. Yeah, you know, I was listening to Glenn. I can see how difficult it is to weave that text that you call the novel. That is always a difficult thing, and you always have to examine how you are doing it and whether it is compelling enough or for the reader that you also imagine whether it is compelling or convincing enough for the reader's imagination. It's always difficult work. And boy, I must congratulate Glenn. And you are working alone. There's who will help you except yourself, your imagination, and your mastery of that language. Because the words conspire to form a whole. You look up the word conspire, you know what it means in the etymology. To conspire is to breathe together, meaning to say the words of the text breathe together to form a harmony. Oh, wow. Writing is never easy. Yeah. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thanks, Jimmy. By the way this works out, I'm finding I only have access to my screen. There are two other screens I'm not seeing. Ano? Kaya kung meron man sa inyong gustong makisawsaw dito, please jump right in because I might not be able to see you. Who would like to follow through on that? Jing, are you speaking? I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, good.
That you can go for a full screen in the view. To the right hand.
It's very weak. Your voice is very weak.
Okay, I was saying that you can go for a full screen.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah, I just went full screen. I hope everybody's here. All right. Thanks. Who'll pick up on these threads that we've laid out? Luna, please, unmute muna, Luna.
Sir, sangayon naman ako dun sa karamihan sa mga obserbasyon ninyo. Pero may isang naging detail dun sa text na, ewan ko kung ako lang ang nakapansin. The characterization of Lourdes na in-establish bilang basurera na nakuha ng character yung nagnanarrate ang isang computer chair mula sa kanya. Tapos somewhere in page 23, si Lourdes, meron siyang, tila may confrontation sila nung narrator nito. Poetry, really? But you don't leave the house and I'd always see you smoking outside in the wee hours of the morning. What bothered me about that detail is, parang may ni-establish na may intimacy yung connection nila para sumbatan ni Lourdes yung character na ito tungkol sa sinseridad ng kanyang tula o pagtula. Na parang si Lourdes din ay ang dating niya ay hindi siya ordinaryong basurera. siya ay nakakakita na napupulsuhan niya kung sino talaga itong Iniga na ito. Parang hinuhubaran niya si Iniga na okay lang naman kung yun ang proyekto nung text. Pero gusto ko pang makumbinse kung paano nakarating doon sa point na yon itong Lourdes na ito. After all, kung sinasabi ni Glenn kanina na this is about knowing the enemy and this is about delving deep enough into some narratives in our history, then I think he should be sharp enough to hear that discordant note in that paragraph. Kasi yun po yung aking pakiramdam doon sa detail lang na yun. And isa pa hong observation, may privileging dito ng mga ng point of view ng CIA, Makapagal. What about the other side? Ang mga nasa hukbalahap. Kasi yung yugtong yun ng kasaysayan natin, all that Cold War orchestration, all that Cold War drama, meron din effect dun sa erasure ng mga hooks po. Siguro baka masyado ako nakikialam dun sa proyekto rin ni Glenn, pero curious lang ako kung lilitaw ang ganoong uri ng complexity. O yun lang po.
Salamat doon, Luna. These are very salient points that you've raised. In fact, yung sinasabi mong parang discordant note na yun, medyo narinig ko rin yun for the simple reason na problema lagi natin ito sa pagsusulat sa English bilang mga Pilipino. Just how do we receive dialogue?
Right.
Knowing that everything is in fact a translation, even the narrative parts are translations
right.
of some native experience. Pero pagka talagang nirender mo na sa English, ay parang may
babago.
Mahirap isipin yung naririnig ko yung poetry at wee hours of the morning.
Right.
Mula sa bibig ni Lourdes. Hindi natin sinasabing walang basurerong pwedeng magbigkas niyan. Pero pagka binigkas mo na talaga sa English, ay napakahirap lunukin. And wala akong madaling solusyon dyan. Pero it's another point for us to consider as writers, Filipino writers in English, the register of speech in our works. The second point you raised has to do with eto nga yung the depiction of evil. And I've often said, especially in recent years, na isa sa mga hamon sa ating mga manunulat ngayon is really not how to show monsters in caricature, but to humanize them, in which way they become even more demonic. Because they're, in this case, literally it's the fellow next door na nagtago dyan. Kaya nga, napaka-challenging na gawing proyekto ito ng, parang si Adolf Eichmann na naglaho sa Argentina, pretending to be an ordinary person without you telegraphing na samang tao yan. Which I think is a missed opportunity because of the very early depiction of him as talagang villain na to begin with. Kaya, again, these are more points to ponder. Anna was raising her hand. Yes, Anna.
Sorry po, actually medyo follow-up lang po doon. Kasi ang mahirap po kasi kapag yung workshop ang novel is we don't really have the entire thing, no?
Yes.
So I was wondering lang po kung ano yung parang peg, or I mean when Glenn was planning this, when he was writing this, I was wondering if there are particular novels that he was thinking of that may have
Okay. That's a good-
influenced the form, the voice. Kasi yun yung parang ini-imagine ko kasi kung like the entire novel ba, is this going to be from this third person point of view limited to Iniga? In
Yes.
which case, andun din yung question ng parang tawag doon, sustaining, kaya bang i-sustain ito, and hindi ba magiging nakakabagot kung isa lang yung
Yes.
voice. So yun lang din, I guess. I was wondering kung para bang Margaret Atwood bodily harm to or whatever. So kung yun, I was wondering lang kung if we can like see that bigger picture,
Mhm.
the entire, like what kind of voice really will this novel be employing? Are there models? Yun lang po.
Kasi tama
Gusto kong sumali,
Kasi
Roland.
yes, June, I'll get to you in a minute. No, kasi ibang-iba yung tono nito dun sa Quiet Ones na lalo na yung early version na nabasa ko which is more relaxed, which takes its time. Ito talaga may effort na may angas siya sa simula pa lang no? May attitude siya doon pa lang pag-shorten sa mga sentence fragments pa lang And you have to worry if the novel is going to be in a sense mannered that way, and how long you can sustain this voice without getting annoying at a certain point. Are you deliberately just withdrawing material to keep up with this voice? Yan ang mangyayari niyan pipilitin mong derendahan mo yung sarili mong gusto mo nang mag-arya pero hindi ka makaano dahil iniipit mo yung sarili mo June.
Yeah. Yung strength ni Glenn lagi yung sa kanyang backstory Kaya yung tapos yung sa community doon sa una niyang nobela. Yung dito yung hinihintay ko ma-develop yung community. Kasi familiar ako doon sa lugar siguro. Kaya yung nabivisualize ko yung mga dinidiscuss niya, hindi ko alam kung gaano pa karami sa community yung i-discuss niya. Kung magko-quote ako dito sa page 21, yung the evacuation crowd was quiet and still like a death. Kasi siguro patay yung radyo. So, ang dami agad sinasabi, ano kung hindi patay yung radyo, ano kung yung wala yung community, ando doon na si Lourdes, ando doon na yung ibang tao. Naglalabas-masok aware ako na napakahirap gawin noon. Kaya lang, ang tingin ko yung challenging doon, yung pagbubuo ng urban poor community na bihirang-bihirang mabasa sa Philippine fiction na yung ganito. Yung siguro yung inaabangan ko. Tapos Glenn, meron ako yung Kafka report in case kailangan mo yung anti-American yung sa Cold War na yung ginawa ng Congress, yung early red tagging. Meron akong document noon kung kakailanganin mo, get in touch tapos screenshot ko sa iyo. Yun lang muna siguro na yung uulitin ko lang ang ganda ng challenge. Yung pagbubuo ng community, na isang klaseng community na I find fresh doon sa fiction writing sa Pilipinas.
Makikita mo kasi dito, speaking of community, na may conscious effort si Glenn na ibahin ito mula hindi Lino Broca yung
correct. Correct.
Itong community mo yung karakter niya, yung sensibilidad niya, nakapag-aral at may nanggaling sa Maynila. Actually, pareho silang out of place ni Palparan dyan. Kung pareho silang outsider na nakikimasok dun sa buhay ng mga tao doon. So they are kind of antipodes to each other, but similar in some ways in their positioning within that community. So maraming ang interesting na dyan na relationships.
Isa na lang, Butch, yun na lang elemento ng sunog.
Oo.
Kasi malimit sa atin pagka sinunog, end of the story. Pero dito mukha yung sunog, the start of the story.
Oo. maganda talagang simula yan. Pero ang tinatanong ko nga kanina, bakit siyempre malaking bagay yan sa looban na masunugan kayo, although ina-expect na rin yan in some ways, pero parang dito napaka-internalized nung drama. Hindi mo nakikita yung, hindi ba, parang Burning of Atlanta yan na eksena na ano.
Pusa lang na.
I mean, how much do you have to pay? How much, how much do you have to show of what people expect to see, and how much do you hold back? Jing was raising her hand. Yes, Jing.
I am reluctant to comment on the piece as a whole, no, because after reading his poetics, the notes on fiction as warning and resistance, I realize how ambitious the work is, and I'm like the last sentence. What else is fiction if not warning and rehearsal of resistance? I know that the project is a very ambitious one and it's really worth writing. But what we have is just a very small piece, no? So I don't want to comment on the whole thing until I know more of where the project is going. I will say one thing though, because I think from what the rest have said might have been overlooked. Although, by the way, my pagination is different from yours. Huh? You've been quoting mga page 20s. Mine is from 27 to 37. So I can't follow the discussion too well. Regarding the point of view character lang, I just want to go there. I don't think it's third person limited kasi. Because when we get Lourdes, we get the thoughts of Lourdes. You have that reminded Lourdes of her doting mother. She lost it like a child pointing heavenward, mourning a runaway balloon. This cannot be the thoughts of Iniga. So maybe the project is to have third person omniscient, in which case Glenn would have the problem not only of conveying the point of view and feelings and emotions of a woman who would be Iniga, but also the other characters. But I am assuming that given the kind of writer that Glenn is, not based on the first novel, which was a very impressive work, I'm sure he is aware of all these things he's doing. No? So some of our comments might not be fair if the point of this novel is not to present only Iniga's point of view, and that some of the things we've been asking about the rest of the community not being really represented, maybe that's going to come later, because obviously we're also going to get Lourdes's point of view, and then maybe the others.
Okay.
Yun lang, Butch.
All right. Fellows, anybody?
Butch.
Roland.
Okay. I just have a couple of points. No? First is that yung excerpt na pinasa natin, for me, is very just telling, not showing, which means that it does not meander. It just tells everything. So parang ako, as a kind of reader, I still have to grapple with a common thread that binds the entire project early on. I suppose this is the early section of the novel, no? And there are a lot of missed opportunities because the way it's telling is very abridged also, which means kunyari, they were referring to a movie. It could have gone through a kind of a discussion kung ano yung movie na yun to better situate or concretize the tone or the time and space of that movie, rather than just to say nanonood sila ng movie. So baka pwedeng medyo i-grapple din ni Glenn yung ganitong klase na wag masyado mabilis na nagtetel lang at nag-move on from one frame to another, but it meanders a bit, no? So the second is I think it's katulad ni Jing, I also feel it's an ambitious project, no? But I would like to have Glenn keep in mind that because it oscillates between two times and spaces, no? Two times and spaces, to think more about yung continuum and disjuncts, like yung red tagging then and red tagging now. Hooks then to the NPAs now. Magsaysay then na isang populist leader then to Duterte now. How might that oscillate? Kahit na ang framing naman talaga ay Palparan at the time of GMA Arroyo, no? But Palparan moves on to this era wherein he is relevant and also irrelevant in terms of the Duterte kinds of politicking, which means kahit wala na si Palparan ngayon, kahit nakakulong na siya or naka-house arrest somewhere, ay may lethal force pa rin itong kanyang legacy. And the third point is maybe also a tip from the Philippine cinema, no? Wherein a much successful project, first film na mga directors, tulad kunyari ni Peque Galiaga directed Oro Plata Mata, no? And then followed by Going Bananas Goes to Hollywood. In other words, for Philippine cinema, you just do your second novel. It should not go beyond a kind of plotting ba. Na it should be better, it should be wiser, it should be more political or more social. You just do the novel that you choose to do, di ba? So parang matagal din yung pressure sa iyo na to kind of level up your kind of professional goals in terms of becoming a novelist or in terms of your direction towards in becoming or being a novelist in this country.
Pagbati sa kay Glenn, ano? Ako na ba yung hello, yes. So pagbati kay Glenn sa kanyang nobela, no? At well, actually, I think I think I've read more of it than most, ano? Itong more chapters of it, ano? At siguro yung nabanggit ni Sir Butch kanina, yung pinag-iisipan ko nga kaugnay nitong unang paragraph, ano? Marami pa kasing pwedeng masabi tungkol sa nobelang ito. At yung usapin nga talaga ng pagbubukas sa isang let's say urban squalor, ano, yung paglalarawan nito, ano, ay napakahusay, ano, at hindi napaka-challenging. At hindi madalas na nakakabasa tayo ng ganyang klaseng representasyon, ano, ng ganitong sunog sa isang komunidad, sa isang urban poor community. At maraming mga boses yan, no? At nakita natin maraming mga boses yung nasa komunidad. Siguro ang isang maaring nagawa, ano, dito, hindi naman dito opinion ko lang ito, no? Ang maaring isang nagawa sa simula nito ay yung pagpaparindig ng cacophony ng mga boses ng komunidad. Ano, mas bago tayo masok kaagad doon sa boses ni Iniga, no, na very specific, very political and very sharp, ano? Ay pwede tayo mag-start doon sa paano ba yung pagtingin ng mga kapitbahay, ng mga ordinaryong tao dito sa paglabas ng isang nagtatago pa lang general doon sa kanilang komunidad. Para mas lang natin ma-emphasize yung chaotic nature of this, ano, and yung disorder of kind of a fire, no, which actually destroys their houses, no, and they have to rebuild, you know, from there. Kaya siguro isang pagtingin kaugnay nung simula na yon, ano, na pwedeng tinig, ano, na pinaghalo-halo na nanggagaling mula sa iba't ibang direksyon, na mga tinig din na may mga walang muwang, may mga tinig na nakarinig lamang ng mga bagay na ito sa TV, ano, sabay, ay, yun pala yun, ano. Para yung simula natin ay, kumbaga, in terms of voice and in terms of event, they sort of coincide, ano. the chaos of a fire and the chaos of voices para ma-replicate natin itong image na ito doon sa mga boses na yan. At yung, kasi yung isang naisip mo rin kung ikaw ay nagbabasa nito, malinaw na to place mo kaagad si Iniga. I mean, more or less, she's like very much like many of us. Ano? I mean, with the same background, the same politics. Ano? Pero yung, I think in the longer view, ay yung kung appropriate sa kanya yung ganong klaseng language, you know. Well, if you're going to read the novel, or if the novel is fully written, no, in a way, mapapaliwanag dapat sa atin how she gained that voice, no? How that very political and sharp voice, you know. What process in her biography, you know, made her gain that voice. But at this point, parang you will also ask that question, no? At the very beginning of this work, you know, na why does she have that voice, you know? And baka there are too many questions that raises at the beginning, you know. So maybe we can proceed more slowly, you know, with this narrative. Pero yung na mas interested ako doon sa kung paano yung the metaphor of a fire, no, in a packed, you know, dense urban poor community, also coincides with a kind of and how this fire, you know, sort of excretes, you know, someone who is hiding, you know, among them, and how that raises so many voices, you know, in that community. Nalo naman natin marami dyan, mga nanood na sa balita, ano, ay, pala yun. Kamukha nga niya yung nasa balita, ano, gano'n, si Palparan, ganyan, no. Oh, he really looks like a bad man, ganyan, no. Gano'n, no. So pwede nating i-steer up ng konti yung voices, no, at the beginning of this work. And then we can go, then I think we can go to this consciousness, which is Iniga. You know.
All right.
But,
thanks, Mon. We just have about maybe a little over 10 minutes left, and I'd like to reserve the last 5 minutes for Glenn to respond. Can we hear from the fellows, please? Yes.
Eman Dumlaw po.
Eman.
Ganon din po yung naramdaman ko dun sa available na text sa atin ng nobela ni Glenn, Pagbati Glenn. Pluralidad ng mga boses ang narinig ko. At kung mapagtatagumpayan ni Glenn, no, base sa mga mungkahi natin yung pag-weave, sangayon nga kay Sir Abad, nung buong nobela, magiging hamon ito, hindi lamang rehearsal, Glenn, para sa isang resistance. Isang uri din ito ng resistance laban sa namamayaning version ng kasaysayan. Kasi ang nakikita ko rito ay muling pagsulat ng kasaysayan. Mula una sa plurality ng voices, at alam kong may mamamayaning boses dito, pero anuman ang version ng namamayaning boses dito, hinahamon ng nobelang ito ang isang dominanteng version ng kasaysayan na pinamumunuan ng mga nagtatanggol kay Palparan at marami pang iba. Salamat po.
Salamat. Sino pa sa mga fellows ang pwedeng salita dito? Yung mga nagsusulat ng prosa dyan. Pakinggan natin ang pinakabatikang nobelista rito, si Charlson. Charlson, anong tingin mo dyan?
Okay, ang ano ko lang is, kasi nabanggit ni Glenn yung The Americans, no? Gusto ko rin yun. Yung The Americans, yung naalala ko, yung mismong katunggali niya, yung FBI, neighbor niya eh. So the main protagonists were actually neighbors. They were friends, nagliligawan yung mga anak nila. And that's why the whole thing worked. No? Although I think in real, mayroon talagang na-discover na mga long-time Soviet sleeper malls nung panahon ni Reagan. But ang ginawa nung show, ginawang neighbors. So since is peg na yung show na yun, I think that's important. No? na in terms of humanizing the other, the enemy, na ano mo sila, no? They're actually into each other's lives. No? And also, I remember a German movie, The Lives of Others, no? Na spy rin siya. East German spy who was actually spying on a dissident, and then but in the end he chose not to unveil, no, what he knew hanggang sa matapos na yung era na yun. So yun, I think in terms of humanizing the enemy, I think that's important.
Okay. Sino pa? We still have about 7-8 minutes left. The fellows, please. You better get used to speaking. Because normally, talagang kayo dapat sa inyo manggagaling yung karamihan ng mga comments dito. Johanna, you're going to be up next, so let's hear from you, Muna. What do you think?
Sorry, there was just one thing that I especially liked in the conversation, which was that the text itself, the Tagalog text, wasn't italicized, and I like the stance that you took with that, like the political stance. Na even with our own text, it should be natural to us. It shouldn't be foreign. And it's the same way that I feel about Bisaya text as well, because something that I want to include in my own narratives, that I don't exoticize it, and I really admire Glenn's stance on that.
Thanks for bringing that up. I should say that I hold exactly the opposite view, also for political reasons. I italicize my Filipino terms because I don't want to yield it to English. I want to preserve it as it is. I don't want it to be lost in the great ocean of English. You know? So may kanya-kanyang pananaw tayo dyan. No? Other views, please. Herlyn, kumusta ka dyan? Anong tingin mo dito?
Hello po. Hi, Glenn. Siguro sa akin, for echoing na lang what was said. For me, the language was very beautiful. Ang sarap niya yung basahin. But siguro yung one of my main concern is the community building, as already said. For me, it was very important to be able to see that world, for me to be able to enter that world, especially if this is part of the opening or earlier part of the novel. So at least siguro for me, it was very important na that moment palang makapasok na ako agad, and kumbaga I have my foothold already doon sa mundo na yon. So yun lang. Thank you.
All right. Sino pa? Kate, Honey, Georgie.
Let's have Miss Christine Lau. She's raising her
Christine,
hand.
yes, Tin.
Hi. Congrats, Glenn. This is really a good. I like reading it a lot. As the rest, I found compelling the fact that the inciting incident here was a fire. That's something, as everyone said, we don't often see. And it's an excellent example. I mean, I'm already thinking if I use it in my classes to demonstrate how to do inciting incidents, for example. Yon. I wanted to raise a question that came to discussion, which is Glenn's concern was whether or not the politics translated well in his writing. And I'm getting the impression that one of the things we have been commenting on is the sharpness of Iniga's political stance, and that may seem to get in the way of, I'm not quite sure, the writing or the communication of the message to the audience. So my question is, and this is like an open question to everyone, with regard to Glenn's question about, being sharp about the political position, how do we imagine that to be? He has shown us a particular model by presenting the stance of a particular character. But given all the other things that we've noticed and the suggestions, easing in with the voices of the community, are there other models of presenting politics in a different way? Thank you.
All right. I think one thought that we can throw into the pot there is that the politics should probably emanate organically from person and situation. In other words, we should learn to know and to appreciate Inigo as a character first before we can really get into her politics. Will come as will emerge from the decisions she makes, from the situation she finds herself in. That's what will define her politics, not anything that comes out of her mouth or of the narrator's perspective. Kaya siguro, before I hand this back over to Glenn, from a reader's and probably also a teacher's point of view, not that he's still my student, but I would probably say, especially given the scope of the material and the ambition of the piece here, my simplest prescription is take your time. Don't telegraph. You know, set the scene. Let it breathe, and things will come more naturally. Alam ko yung gigil ng kwentista na talagang baka makalimutan ko to, ilagay ko na dito. You know, parang you're leaving a trail of crumbs for you to be able to follow. Make sure that you're on the pero just set the scene of this big fire that raises this neighborhood. You were asking for, sinasabi yung community, you're looking for a dramatic ensemble here. And then you got emerges. And then Palparan emerges more organically out of this situation. So we probably have around 5 minutes left, and I'd like to give the rest of that to Glenn to do his own summing up. Glenn, all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Sir Butch. Thank you, everyone. Interesting, no? Because when I was writing the thing, yun nga, in the context of a PhD program, my supervisor naman was the complete opposite, no? The complete opposite of the complete opposite of take your time. His constant counsel or note is always pick up the pace. No, kasi I know that I wanted to do something different with this project in terms of plot, for instance. I wanted this to be more plotty than the first quote unquote novel. So ang challenge talaga sa akin, as Sir Butch said, yung management of the details. So kasi I wanted things to be circuitous. So halimbawa the fire, there is a dramatic quote unquote dramatic fire sequence, but it's gonna come super later. My intention of the design of the thing is parang maraming puzzle pieces that you eventually assemble together. So most of kaya abridged talaga yung mga like one-liners, yung mga quote unquote events ngayon, kasi eventually they will, at their appointed time they will unravel. No, if you remember the structure of and even the prose of God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, parang medyo ganon, no? Yung parang alam mo na lahat ng mangyayari sa simula, and then the details emerging from that are revealed much later on. I'd like to think I'd like to think I also addressed that in the latter parts of the thing, no? Yung baka nga parang my mistake was to parang give the impression that it's a CIA centric thing, but actually no, parang the intention of really the intention behind uncovering all those materials is precisely to undermine them or to present the counterpoint to them. Saka yung nabanggit din ni Sir Roland na the undulating between the past and the present. That's also one intention in the project, and I hope that that translates eventually. Kasi parang yun nga yung design niya talaga. No? Kahit saan siya pumunta, may mirror. The father figure is not presented here yet, I think, fully. Pero meron siyang sort of backstory that will kind of mirror Iniga. So parang that suggests continuity in the terror, no? Tapos yung nabanggit ni Sir Charleson about the magandang example yun, no? Yung the FBI agent that's constantly pursuing the American's couple, kapitbahay at friend nila. Meron din ditong gano'n, no? Meron ding dalayan si Iniga with, not to spoil anything, with someone from the enemy camp. So I hope really that yun nga, parang the limitation of the excerpt is we can't really like consider all of these, no? Pero I hope they are all addressed dun sa kabuuan ng trabaho. Thank you everyone.
All right, thank you too, Glenn. I think we had a very good first session here. We will trust Glenn to take our points into account, and I'm sure he knows what he's doing. So we trust the author to finish up what he began. Maraming salamat ulit sa inyong lahat, and we look forward to more fruitful discussions with you this morning and the rest of the day. Salamat.
Maraming salamat at pagbati, Glenn. Sa ngayon po ay pansamantala nating ititigil ang ating palihan. I-move po natin ang ating session 1 to 1 p.m. live stream para po magkaroon tayo ng lunch break. So, ayun, muli po, tigil po muna tayo sa ating session ngayon at babalik po tayo ng 1 p.m.
Okay.
Anong work, Rona, ang i-discuss? Nandito na ba si Emmanuel Barameda? Rona?
Sir?
Anong work ang i-discuss? Nakapasok na ulit ba si Emmanuel?